the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development, and our fourth and last meeting with witnesses in our study of zero-emission vehicles. Today we have four witnesses. Each witness will have 5 minutes to give their opening remarks, and that will be followed, of course, by the standard question and answer session. Of course, you can speak in, I'm speaking to the witnesses here, of course. You can speak in either official language. If you're not speaking at a particular moment, please put your mic on mute. Also, in order to allow members to get the most information out of their questioning of the witnesses, if the witnesses could be as succinct as possible in providing answers, getting to the core of the subject matter of the question as directly as possible, that will allow members to ask more questions and the committee get more information for its report. So, without further ado, I believe we're ready to go. I would ask.
Monsieur le Président.
Oui.
Mr. Chair, just with respect to how it's going to operate, we have received documents on several occasions, and I'd like to share with you what we received from Electric Mobility Canada. As a member, I'd like to have some information. Were these documents revised at all? We're accumulating all types of documents, and then there are changes made to the documents. So could the clerk identify very clearly when there's a repeat of a document that it is an amended document? Could he just tell us what the changes are? Because I'm having great difficulty following these documents. The witness submitted these documents. It was sometimes. Are you saying it was sent 2 or 3 times? Well, that probably doesn't happen very often, because once it's tabled, unless the witness submitted some ancillary information, additional information that was connected with the initial submission. Sometimes it's 2 different types of documents for the same witness. Sometimes it's information, just notes that are being added on that was tabled by the witness. Well, yes, I do understand. I just want to be constructive in my criticism. But it should be indicated clearly that it's an amended document. Otherwise, we're going to just think it's a repeat of the same document. Thanks so much, Chair.
With today we have the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Electric Mobility Canada, Global Automakers of Canada, and Ballard Power Systems. We'll go in that order, 5 minutes each, starting with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, represented by Aaron Woodrick, the Director, Federal Director. Go ahead, Mr. Woodrick, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon to all, and thank you very much to the committee for the invitation today. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, for those who are not familiar with us, we are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan group founded in 1990, and we have approximately 235,000 supporters across the country. And we focus really on just 3 broad areas: lower taxes, less government waste, and accountability and transparency in government. And with respect to the committee's study and the reason for our appearance today, our submission is with regard to the second point on government waste, and specifically what we see as a well-intentioned but ultimately wasteful program intended to encourage the purchase of ZEVs. Now, in October, our group released some access to information documents we obtained regarding the cost of a program launched by the federal government last year entitled the Incentives for Zero-Emission Vehicles. This was a program that provided a taxpayer subsidy of up to $5,000 off the purchase price of electric vehicles if the base model was listed for less than $45,000. And if that base model was under $45,000, higher price versions of the same model up to $55,000 would then also qualify. Now, the way it works is dealerships apply this to the price of eligible vehicles when they're purchased, and then they apply to Transport Canada in order to be reimbursed for the subsidy afterwards. Now, this program was launched in May 2019, and it was expected to run for 3 years and had a budget of $300 million. As of January of this year, $134 million in rebates had been issued, with the rest of the funds expected to be entirely gone by the end of 2020. Tesla has received the most subsidies from this program, taking in more than $60 million just between May 2019 and the end of March, so a little bit under a year. Now, notably, Tesla's Model 3 did not qualify for this subsidy initially because the base model was priced too high. It was priced at $53,700, well above the $45,000 price cap. To solve this, Tesla introduced a Canada-only version of the Model 3 they called the Standard Range, with a non-negotiable reduced rate of 150 kilometers per charge. Now, Tesla priced this at $44,999, $1 below the program cutoff rate, to be eligible for the subsidy. Now, interestingly, they only sold 126 of this base model, but they did sell 12,000 of the higher priced Standard Range Plus, which was now eligible for the subsidy because of the existence of this base model. Now, I would suggest that this is a problem. Presumably, the purpose of having a cutoff price was set precisely to avoid having these subsidies go to more expensive vehicles, and yet that's exactly what happened here. But perhaps even more importantly, if the purpose of these subsidies is to encourage the uptake of zero-emission vehicles, it seems that a relevant question is whether they're actually leading to a higher uptake or simply providing subsidies to people who are going to buy ZEVs anyway. It's especially fair to ask that given that question, given the price points that we're talking about here. Even a $45,000 vehicle, I would suggest, never mind a $55,000 vehicle, would be considered a luxury vehicle by most Canadians. And I think it's a fair question to ask whether regular Canadian taxpayers should be subsidizing the purchase of luxury vehicles for people who are fully prepared to pay full price for them. I would suggest the answer is no. And for that reason, our organization believes that this program should be scrapped or at the very least revised. I just close by observing that this government has in the past demonstrated an awareness of this windfall effect, where subsidizing the cost of something simply gives extra benefit to people who would be happy to incur the full cost anyway. The current government eliminated tax credits for transit and children's sports and arts using this exact argument, since there was little evidence that they were leading to increased uptake of these things, but were just simply providing a windfall to people who were going to buy transit passes or enroll their kids in sports anyway. Taxpayer dollars, of course, are valuable. For every use they have, there are many other potential alternative uses, and I would urge this committee to explore some of those uses to ensure taxpayers are getting good value for their money. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Woodrick.
Thank you, Mr. Woodrick. That was very interesting and very well explained. We'll go now to Mr. Daniel Breton from Electric Mobility Canada for 5 minutes. Mr. Breton.
Est-ce que Monsieur Breton est là?
Is Mr. Breton there? Can you hear me? Yes, Mr. Breton. Please go ahead. 5 minutes. I can start now? 5 minutes, you're saying? All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the committee on zero-emission vehicles. Founded in 2006, Electric Mobility Canada was one of the first organizations in the world that dealt with electric mobility. We are amongst Canadian experts in this field.
There's more than 220 member organizations, including utilities, vehicle manufacturers, infrastructure providers, tech companies, research centers, cities, universities, fleet managers, etc. We work on electric mobility from bikes to cars, from buses to boats, from trucks to trains, from mining to research to assembly to infrastructure to recycling, and that all in all parts of Canada. I personally have been working on electric mobility for almost 20 years and wrote many books on the subject. At home, we drive electric cars, and by the way, we live in a rural area. EMC supports incentive for the purchase of light and heavy-duty electric vehicles from buses to school buses to trucks. Incentives for the purchase of used EVs and PHEVs. Financial support for the purchase and installation of charging infrastructure. A federal ZEV standard. Innovation programs related to the EV industry. Education for consumers. Electrification of government fleets. Training and retraining programs for workers across Canada. In the first half of 2020, ZEV sales were at 3.5% of all light-duty vehicle sales in Canada. Unless a ZEV standard is adopted, Canada won't be able to meet its EV adoption targets. It's still very hard to find an EV since only 33% of dealers in Canada have at least one EV in stock. Outside of Quebec, BC, and Ontario, fewer than 20% of dealerships have at least one EV on their lot. So even though dealers want to sell EVs, they don't have enough supply to meet consumer demand. According to a 2019 report by Clean Energy Canada, 560,000 clean technology jobs are expected to be created in Canada by 2030, with 50% of them in the clean transportation sector. Between 2021 and 2030, if Canada follows the example of California, BC, Quebec, and other jurisdictions around the world and adopt the ZEV standard, expected sales revenues, according to our calculations, are projected to exceed $190 billion. Parle en français.
I'm going to change to French now. Canada's goal is to reduce GHG emissions by at least 30% by 2030 with respect to the 2005 levels. In 2005 and between that date and 2018, GHG emissions increased here by 9%. The GHG emissions that come from transportation it makes Canada one of the first sources of GHGs in Canada. According to the International Energy Agency, Canada is the #1 country in the world for GHG emissions per kilometer in its whole stock of vehicles, even ahead of the United States. During the same period, GHG emissions in the electric sector dropped by 46%, so making the Canada's electric system one of the most clean in the world. According to the National Research Centre, electric vehicles, light-duty electric vehicles and heavy-duty ones, are the cleanest and cleaner than gas or diesel vehicles. And they can be used everywhere in Canada. By 2025, their use will be increased by 50%. Moving to English now.
Air pollution in Canada has caused 14,600 deaths, which is 7.5 times the death toll of motor vehicle accidents. In 2017, transport was responsible for the majority of total nitrogen oxide emissions and carbon monoxide emissions in Canada. According to the 2019 Health Canada report, the total annual economic value associated with air pollution is $114 billion. So in conclusion, EVs from light to heavy duty can help Canada meet their goals on climate change, lower air pollution, and help Canadian citizens' health as well. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Breton.
Thank you, Mr. Breton. Is Mr. Adams there? I know that you were disconnected.
At one point, I imagine you're back on the call, Mr. Adams. Are you there? No? Okay, so we'll go then to Mr. Pocard of Ballard Power Systems for 5 minutes, please.
Bonjour,
I'm Nicolas Pocard. I'm the Director of Marketing Strategy for Ballard Power Systems.
Technology company based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and I've been developing fuel cell and hydrogen technology for the past 40 years. Today, I would like to highlight the key role that hydrogen will play in the decarbonization of economy in Canada, and especially when it comes to heavy-duty transportation. We believe that if you want to meet the objective of carbon neutrality by 2050, we are going to need hydrogen heavy-duty mobility to achieve those targets. By that, I encounter the trucking, rail, marine industry, where hydrogen and fuel cell provide a path to decarbonization. Therefore, in addition to that, we believe that with the maturity and the leadership that Canada has on hydrogen and fuel cell technology, it represents a unique economic opportunity But we need to maintain that leadership. We need to invest in the deployment and in the R&D of fuel cell in Canada. We need to keep that. We start to see outside of Canada, countries in Europe are doing major investment in hydrogen. We see the same thing in the US, in China, in Japan, and Korea. We are looking forward to the soon to be announced hydrogen strategy that Canada should be, that the Ministry of Energy and Mines should be announcing very soon. But we want to make sure that this strategy is backed up by support in order to deploy technology in Canada, as well as supporting R&D to maintain that technology leadership. We strongly believe that Canada must join the other countries. We have recognized the fundamental role of hydrogen and fuel cell technology to the decarbonization of heavy-duty transportation, representing a unique economic and job opportunity in Canada. And then we believe that it's possible to achieve the target of 10,000, to have 10,000 fuel cell buses and trucks in operation across Canada by 2030. This also represents a really important investment in the value chain, since energy, hydrogen, being produced from natural resources of Canada, from wind, solar, hydro, or in the prairies using the natural gas converted to blue hydrogen and carbon sequestration to ensure the local production in Canada of low carbon hydrogen, as well as through the entire value chain. A fuel cell vehicle is an electric vehicle, includes all the equipment being produced here in the value chain, from the fuel cell system, the powertrain, and the different integration. So this represents a unique economic opportunity as well as a way of achieving those targets of decarbonization. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, Monsieur Pocard.
Thank you, Mr. Pocard. I don't know if Mr. Adams is with us. No, he's not been able to connect again. Well, this is what we'll do. We will begin with the rounds of questioning, and if Mr. Adams does succeed in joining us, is Mr. Adams there now? Inaudible for the interpreter. If Mr. Adams can join us, we will insert his presentation into our proceedings. We'll start with Mr. Godin. Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the three witnesses. We'll thank our fourth witness when he's able to join us. But, technology being what it is, this happens very often, if not daily. My questions are going to be directed to the representative of Quebec, Mr. Breton, who was the Minister of the Environment in 2012. Mr. Breton, you were very clear in your remarks. You're a man who is very sensitive to the environment. But I don't know if your successor has the same concerns, but for the benefit of parliamentarians, it's now the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Mr. Blanchette, in the House of Commons, who took over this gentleman's responsibilities in the environment at one time. I would like to have information, sir, on the impact of the production of electric vehicles in terms of GHGs. We are concerned that GHGs produced by the consumption of petroleum is one element, is one thing. But the composition of an electric vehicle, the makeup of it has an impact on the environment. It does also emit GHGs. I'm not necessarily sure that we're going to be carbon neutral when we want to be. That is my question to you, Mr. Breton. Well, listen, thank you. Very simply, it's an excellent question. What you're talking about is the complete life cycle of a vehicle, from the production of the vehicle. That includes, of course, its battery until it is considered no longer useful. On the brief I submitted to you on pages 8 and 9, there is an analysis that shows that the complete life cycle, not just the production of the battery. And we have in Quebec, batteries like that are 35% less high than GHGs that are emitted by a fossil fuel vehicle. And so it is a vehicle. The electric vehicle is certainly much cleaner than any other vehicle. It doesn't matter where the electricity is produced from, it's always cleaner than gas. But since 2013, the production of batteries has vastly improved. That means that the environmental impact has improved, has changed. The life cycle of batteries is also changing. The less it pollutes, the electric vehicle becomes increasingly ever cleaner. Yeah, but you're talking about the production of the battery, the actual manufacturing of the battery. But beyond that, they have to extract the materials that are used to build the battery. We're talking about raw, basic materials, raw materials. The production of a battery does have an effect on greenhouse gases. You haven't convinced me about the use of the electric vehicle. I am not convinced as a solution. I think that the electric vehicle, an EV, is one part of a solution, but we will still need oil to produce the plastic materials that are used in the production of the EV. That's the way I look at it. Well, what I was saying to you about the impact of when you look at page 8 and 9 of the national research piece that I included in my brief, it speaks to the extraction of the materials from the mines. It speaks to the actual manufacture of the battery itself. This is what we're talking about. We're talking also about the raw materials. So in the case of petroleum, based materials, the use of the vehicle, whether it's electric or uses gas, completes the life cycle of the vehicle. That is the study that I recommend, which says that A plus B leads to a lesser negative influence on the environment. In another vein, the impact of electric vehicles currently, we do have electric networks that exist. And, you know, in Quebec, you have said you live in a rural area. You know, Quebec's rural areas can be very cold. In January, there's a problem in terms of supply. And Hydro-Quebec, this Quebec undertaking asks us to reduce our consumption of electricity in January. So how can you not see that you might be putting the cart before the horse, creating another problem before you settle an initial problem? So what are you going to do in terms of the transition of the consumption of electricity so that the consumption is at a level? Unfortunately, we're at 6 minutes right now. But I can see that your name is on the list.
Plus qu'une fois, donc vous aurez l'occasion de répondre.
You will have, that's my question at least. I'll have the opportunity to have it answered a little later on. Yes, that's fine. Perfect. We anticipate the answer. If I've understood, it's Ms. O'Connell for the Liberals.
Ms. O'Connell?
Ms. O'Connell?
Go ahead, please, for 6 minutes.
I'm having issues with my internet, so I had to connect via my cell phone. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. It's all good.
Okay, sorry about that.
Do you have a headset for the interpretation?
No, because the headset doesn't work on the cell phone.
Oh.
I can connect with a different one.
Sure.
Give me one. Perhaps do you want to go to one of
Sure. Well, let's
my
go to
colleagues
Mr.
and I'll come back.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Mr. Longfield, please.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Sure, thanks. We can switch spots. I wanted to start off with Ballard Power. We've had quite a few presentations on plug-in vehicles, but yours is the first that's really focused on the hydrogen cell technology. I'm wondering, in terms of the market, whether the technology enters into the market at a certain horsepower or a certain type of motor, or whether, like, say, Class 5 or Class 8 vehicles, or whether they would also be available on smaller vehicles.
Thank you very much. It's a good question. So today the technology is available for all type of vehicle, from light duty to heavy duty vehicles. But I think what is important is try to identify where is the best case, the use case, which application, at the end of the day, it's electrification, fuel cell or battery, both are electric vehicle. It's a matter of how do you bring the energy to the vehicle, how you store the energy on board of the vehicle. And then each use case will differ. So you have, when you look at heavy duty, the bigger the vehicle is, the larger the payload is that you have to carry. Then hydrogen makes more sense because of you don't have to carry heavy duty. You don't have to compete with a very large battery weight against the goods you want to transport. Duty cycle is also very important. If you have a taxi which operates multiple shifts, have little time to recharge, when hydrogen makes sense. So it's a mixture of the use case, the payload, the duty cycle that you want to have. Now, the technology itself is available. You can have a fuel cell engine ranging to power a car all the way to a train. It's just a matter to find where is the best application based on the use case.
Great, thank you. And in terms of the climate change impact, when you look at the duty cycle of a normal passenger car, sits parked for 95% of the time, where, as you said, a taxi or a freight truck or a delivery truck has closer to 95% usage of vehicle time. So the impact on the actual climate change could be higher with the fuel cell technology as compared to some of the others. But I suppose the mix of the market would be something that would be interesting for us to include in our report.
Absolutely. Those vehicles tend to have a much higher impact on the emission. They have, compared to a personal car, so they operate longer times, they have more emission. And I think also same thing that the question was asked before, we need to look at the total life cycle cost. And a fuel cell has a big advantage here. It's much less energy intensive to produce. It's the manufacturing part. So the life cycle cost of the fuel cell from cradle to grave is also very attractive. Today at Ballard, we recycle the fuel cell. So when fuel cell reaches the end of life, we can recycle, rebuild it using the same material and recover 95% of the precious metal which are there. So I think it's important to look at the use case as well as the total life cycle cost.
Okay, I was back in the 90s, I was supplying pressure regulators to Ballard in the very early stages of development. So it's interesting to see how far the market has gone. I'm also, just to stay on Ballard just for a little bit longer, I've only got a few more minutes. I'm thinking of the part supply and the, I mentioned I was supplying pressure regulators. What type of part supply do you have? You're in Vancouver, which is outside of the auto parts supply of Southern Ontario. How does that integrate with the North American part supply between Canada, the United States, or in fact across Canada?
I think it's a good question. I think it's changed a lot in the past 10 years. So when we started that journey at Ballard, it was very hard to find parts. It was bespoke. Nobody was developing those components. I'm thinking about the components outside of the core of the fuel cell that we make at Ballard. But if you look at a compressor, pumps, DC-DC converters, all the elements of the balance of plant, what we have seen lately is a lot of manufacturers, tier one automotive suppliers, are now looking toward developing component for fuel cell system. So we have the big names like the Bosch of this world or Linamar, or those. So we start now to have access to a supply chain of the automotive supply chain, which are developing components that we need for us to build that fuel cell engine.
Right, and you've mentioned Linamar, which is in my riding, and they have a new building where they're making parts for this market. And that's why I wanted to put that on the table.
And we
But
are working
also
with them.
Honda, if I might just quickly, Honda is also, I think, procuring a fuel cell company. Some of the automotive manufacturers are racing to get into this by acquiring other companies. Is that another market move that we might be watching for?
Yeah, we have seen that. In Canada, we have seen Cummins as the largest manufacturer of diesel engine in North America to purchase Hydrogenics, a Canadian company. So we probably see a consolidation and integration of some of the value chain in the automotive industries. I think that's something we have seen also in Europe a lot. A lot of the tier one or OEM in Europe have invested in fuel cell hydrogen technology by either themselves developing it, like Daimler and Volvo, or acquiring companies like Bosch has done on other automotive supplier.
You haven't mentioned Americans. Are the Americans in this market?
Yeah, Cummins, I mentioned Cummins. So Cummins has done an investment there. And then, as we know, the GM has their own fuel cell development program that they have accelerated lately.
Very good. Great information. Thank you for that. Over to you,
Thank
Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. What we're going to do is this. I'm told that Mr. Adams has been able to join us now. I'm going to go now to Mr. Adams for 5 minutes, and then we will continue with Madame Causier.
Mr. Adams, you're on mute, perhaps?
Yes, is that better?
Yeah. Is your microphone, do you have a microphone with your headset? Or? Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and honorable members.
Excuse me, it's a bit weak. Would that be at our end? Could you bring the microphone a little closer?
Sure.
Perfect. That's great.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and honorable members, for the opportunity to appear in front of you today. I apologize for the technical difficulties getting connected to the meeting, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to start off by saying that the Global Automakers of Canada represents 15 international automakers and their Canadian operations in the country here, which represents 20 odd models, actually. Our affiliates and their members employ more than 77,000 Canadians in vehicle manufacturing, sales, distribution, parts, service, finance, and in their head office operations. In 2019, the member companies of the GACU sold 1,146,000 vehicles, which represented about 60% of the auto market and over 60% of Canada's 3,300 new vehicle dealerships. Our members are committed to the decarbonization of the products they are producing. However, it is clear that the goal of decarbonization of the light-duty transportation sector cannot be achieved by focusing on new vehicle sales alone, which represent approximately 8% of all vehicles on the road. It is also clear that we will not achieve our GHG reduction goals for the overall light-duty fleet by focusing on driving the uptake of ZEV technology alone, as opposed to focusing on the real goal, which is GHG emissions reductions from the transportation sector. Currently in Canada, there are about 168,000 zero-emission vehicles on the road out of a total light-duty vehicle population of approximately 23.5 vehicles. This equates to ZEVs comprising less than 1% of all the light-duty vehicles currently on the road. That said, as others have noted that have appeared before you, hundreds of billions of dollars are being invested in zero-emission vehicle technology globally by automakers. And while COVID-19 has in some cases delayed the introduction of models, it has by no means deterred automakers from the pursuit of the development and introduction of ZEVs. In fact, and importantly, I think for those that have suggested there are supply issues, GAC members alone will have more than 125 BEV and FEV models brought to the market between 2021 and 2025. In this regard, it's important to understand and underscore the only real difference between the perspectives of governments, NGOs, and the automotive industry with respect to zero-emission vehicles is the issue of timing. We share the same goal. The automotive industry is going through unprecedented transition, and the likes of which it has not experienced for more than 100 years, if it's more than a 100-year history. That transition is moving quickly, but it will take time. It takes 3 to 5 years to bring a new vehicle model to market. and roughly $1 to $2 billion, and auto companies must continue to earn profits on their current vehicle mixes to support the development of these vehicles. Additionally, new suppliers and the supply chain partners must be developed and cultivated to secure long-term contracts for batteries and other components that are completely new for the production of ZEVs. As noted, the industry is changing, but it does take time, and the change is also responsive to demand, and supply will likely lag demand for the immediate future. However, we must underscore in no uncertain terms that short-term regulatory intervention in the form of ZEV mandates is out of step with the medium and longer term time horizon of this industry transition. We have a series of recommendations that are on submission, but I think it's more important to hear questions from committee members.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. So we'll continue with Madame Posé for 6 minutes, please.
Alors, merci. Thank you very much. My first question is for Mr. Daniel Breton, Canada Electric Mobility. I always associate health and the environment. You made the same association. You say that more pollution that exists, well, the higher the health costs. Can you give us some detail about your thinking? Because this is a great concern for me. Well, the study, the 2019 study that came out, talked about the impact of $114 billion a year impact, is a good indication. There is a link there with transportation. Light-duty vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles do contribute heavily, or at least significantly, to atmospheric pollution. And we have to find an efficient way of dealing with that. But really, right now, we are stagnating. There is an increase in atmospheric pollution as we speak. Doctors and Health Canada expect that there will be an increased death rate because of this, because of pollution that is related to transportation. The more people stay close to the source of pollution, they have a greater elevated risk of having cardiovascular problems, pulmonary problems, and certain types of cancer. So that's 80% of the time it'll be cardiovascular problems. Atmospheric pressure pollution is both global and local because there can be some very extremely negative effects of an elevated pollution rate. There have been doctors who have spoken about this and written about this. Mr. Breton, when you say that this is due to transportation, this is basically what you're saying to me, to us. Yes. Mr. Woodrick from the Canadian Federation, Taxpayers Federation, you say from in the outset that the government incentives aren't good. I don't really share your opinion because the increase in EVs in Quebec and BC has been marked, and there have been incentives that have been added to the federal incentives. In addition, there has been a drop of 55% in terms of deaths when I refer you to when Mr. Doug Ford made heavy cuts in these subsidies. And in Georgia, there was an increase of 80% in deaths when the incentives were taken away. I'm just making a comment here to show how little I share your opinion. But nonetheless, there are measures that exist in the United States. There's an incentive that is a non-refundable tax credit that takes into account the pay level of the person. The Ford 150s, light-duty trucks, Dodge Rams, and so on are amongst the big sellers. They cost about $150,000, and they are heavy polluters. So let me come back to measures. Would you be in favor of a regulatory measure for the taxpayer, which could help to increase the automobile market to reach zero net? Mr. Woodrick.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I want to be clear. I don't doubt that there are some individuals who only purchase the vehicle because of the subsidy. The question I'm asking is, it's important to measure what is the impact of that subsidy? How many more people are buying them as a result of the subsidy as compared to the people who would have purchased the vehicle anyway? Because again, remember, we are talking about vehicles that are fairly expensive. And I think the whole reason we're even talking about a subsidy is that these are vehicles that are above the price point of the average Canadian. I don't believe that I would be in a position to buy a $55,000 vehicle with or without a
Juste une chose, Monsieur Woodrick.
Yes, but there's one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Woodrick, but I'd like you to get to the question that I was asking. Would you be in favor of having a regulatory measure that wouldn't cost the taxpayer, but could help the automobile industry reach zero emissions?
We take no position on that. We are not an environmental group. We are focusing on the subsidy. So if it's something that does not have an impact on the taxpayer, then we are completely ambivalent.
Alors, je vais vous poser.
I'm going to ask you another question. And with respect to the Sustainable Development Agency, Trans Mountain has received some $12 billion, as have other pipeline industries. Don't you think that this is a bit excessive? Wouldn't it be better to spend the money in something that would help Canadians health-wise?
Yes, madam, we're on the record as opposing the nationalization of Trans Mountain.
Thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Bachrach for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be here with the committee. Thank you for allowing me to sub in for Laurel Collins, my colleague. And thank you to the witnesses for your testimony. It's been very interesting. Mr. Breton, you mentioned that you live in a rural area and you drive an electric vehicle. I also live in rural northern British Columbia and drive a Chevy Bolt through the winter, and it's working out really well for my family and I. So thanks for sharing your story. Maybe I'll start with Mr. Breton, and I've got a bunch of questions, but I'll start with you. A question about Canada being left behind in the manufacturing of zero-emission vehicles. Obviously, this is a growing market, and our auto sector could use the jobs now more than ever. What does it say about the industrial strategy that we need as a country if we're going to capitalize on this opportunity?
Thank you very much for your question. This is very important because, believe it or not, I've been talking about a Canadian EV industry strategy since 2006. And because I said, as time goes by, we're going to switch more and more towards EV from light duty to heavy duty vehicles. So more and more studies are coming out, one from ICCT that came out a few months ago saying that if Canada doesn't have a strategy, doesn't have a plan for an industry, whether it's for light duty or heavy duty vehicles, we might end up having no automotive sector 15 to 20 years from now in Canada. We've been in decline for many years. And now, since we have so many assets in Canada, we have strong OEMs based in Ontario. We have minerals, we have metals, we have scientists from Nova Scotia to BC who can do the job. We have people in Quebec building cars and trucks and buses. We have people in Manitoba. So we are presently working on an EV industry strategy with other stakeholders so that we can see all the progress that we can make, because we want to fight climate change. We want to fight air pollution, but we also want to create jobs in the meantime. So for us to have an EV industry strategy, a Canadian strategy, makes total sense.
Thank you, Mr. Breton. Perhaps I'll move on to Mr. Woodrick. Your last comment, I was quite intrigued by that. If it doesn't have an impact on taxpayers, we're completely ambivalent. Well, taxpayers are also citizens, and all of the surveys and polling show that citizens in Canada are very concerned about the climate crisis, and they want action. And of course, a lot of climate pollution comes from light-duty vehicles, and the policies we're talking about today are meant to drive down that pollution. Is that, like, broadly, is that a policy objective that you support? Oh.
I think you're on.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, we're not a group that's trying to get involved in every issue. That's the reason that we focus on the taxpayer angle. And look, I have no beef with electric vehicles, ZEBs. I mean, if they can make good products and people want to buy them, I have no objection to that. The reason for the critique of this specific policy was whether or not it is achieving the objective that the policy is set out to do. And I'm simply questioning whether or not there's evidence that the subsidy is leading to the uptake, or is the cause of the uptake rather than a windfall to people who are going to buy them anyway.
So here's the thing, Mr. Woodrick, and my question is, around the world, there are jurisdictions that are really leading when it comes to the transition to zero-emission vehicles, right? Among those jurisdictions, do you know of any that lack or that don't have a zero-emission vehicle incentive, like the one that you're so opposed to?
Not to my knowledge, but the question is when we reach a critical mass, and I think we know the answer to that. We're going to reach a critical mass of take-up when the price point drops to a significant point where they're competitive with other vehicles, and that's not going to be achieved by a $5,000 subsidy at a $55,000 price point.
So my last question for you, and you know, part of your argument around low-income Canadians, I think, has merit. I wonder, and you expressed some willingness to look at changes to the incentive program. What specific changes do you think would best allow lower income Canadians to buy zero emission vehicles in the context of an incentive program?
Right. To be clear, I mean, we don't support this approach, but if you were going to do it, lowering the threshold to ensure that the subsidy applied only like lower the ceiling. Right now it applies if vehicles that go up to 55,000. I think lowering the ceiling would ensure that the money is more likely to go to people who could use a subsidy rather than the people that are just happy to get it.
Thank you, Mr. Woodrick. Maybe I'll go back to Mr. Breton. You can buy, in British Columbia, you can buy a used Nissan Leaf for about $12,000. That's pretty affordable. Especially given the very low operating costs. Have you thought about what kinds of incentives could be used to help lower income Canadians purchase zero emission vehicles and contribute to this larger policy goal that we're trying to achieve?
Yeah, actually we have, and we support some kind of rebate for used EVs or PHEVs in Canada. Actually, there's a rebate in BC, there's one in Quebec as well. And for people who can't afford or don't want to pay for a brand new vehicle, whether it's a gas vehicle or an electric vehicle, I mean, getting people to get on board with EVs or PHEVs which are used is not an issue for us because we think it only makes sense. And for me, you know, I would like to add the fact that the average purchase cost of a gas vehicle in Canada in 2019 was over $40,000. And now we see that gas vehicles at a very cheap price point, like Honda Fits and Nissan Micra, they're all disappearing. So now the price point, the beginning price point of a vehicle is not $15,000 anymore for most cars. They're at $25,000 at least.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'll go to the 5-minute round now, starting with Mr. Redekop.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I want to start with Mr. Woodrick and just kind of carry on this theme a little bit. So just to kind of recap what you were telling us, I guess, it was interesting to hear the story of the Tesla that essentially gamed the system to get the Model S in under that price point so that it could qualify for the program. And I do share your view that a $55,000 vehicle would be a luxury vehicle for most Canadians. And so essentially, what I guess maybe just comment a bit on this, that essentially what we're doing is we are subsidizing a vehicle that a wealthy person is going to buy, but at the same time we are not really helping out the lower income, the person that's struggling to get by, who's buying that $25,000 vehicle. So is there a policy rationale for this that you can figure out?
I mean, not really. Again, there's good intention here. I understand what the government is trying to do. I don't think anybody objects to the idea of we would be better off if people were driving cleaner vehicles. I think that's a noble objective. The question is whether the policy is actually doing that. And I don't see a lot of, if there is evidence, we have not seen it. And I think that's something worth investigating. The reason, again, as I said, for the subsidy is these cars are very expensive. And I think we need to ask ourselves whether or not the likelihood of like mass take up in terms of market share is ever going to happen unless the average price point reaches a point where it becomes competitive so that mass numbers of Canadians can purchase it.
Right, and you're probably well aware that the NDP's position in this government, in fact, the reason we still have a government is because the NDP has been supporting the Liberals on key legislation that they've been bringing forward. And so to hear the NDP support for this this incentive that benefits primarily the super rich, I think is a little rich actually, given that they also at the same time support the Liberal carbon tax policies, which affects the working class. Do you think it's a little rich in that sense?
Yeah, look, I just think that we need to separate the intention from the outcome. I think most folks in all parties have good intentions, but that doesn't mean that the policy is going to be designed in a way that actually achieves the outcome. And I just don't see that this policy is doing that.
So as you look ahead, when I look at my riding in Saskatoon West, people are concerned about Jagmeet Singh's comments about holding up this Liberal government. And so, you've seen these incentive programs. And I guess as you think ahead, can you comment on some economic devastation that an NDP Liberal coalition will do to Saskatoon with environmental policies in this direction?
I would just say that we have to remember that there's costs involved here, and that when we undertake policies with a good intention, there are collateral effects. That's the reason, for example, that the government with the carbon tax, for example, they have introduced the rebate. We don't believe that the rebate always compensates people to the point that the government claims, but they recognize that there is a cost, and that's why they've introduced the rebate. And I think that applies to other policies. This is a policy that costs money. This is $300 million that could go to any number of other things, including things that might be seeking the same objective, but do a better job of it. So I think we have to be mindful, not waste money, and especially with the measures like this, if you're going to target the money, target it at where it's most needed. And I would suggest the people who can afford a $55,000 vehicle are not the most needy.
Thanks. Mr. Adams, I was a little bit, as I was looking through your notes, so you're on the one hand, you're saying that supply will lag demand. And I think this gets a little bit to the point we were just speaking about. Supply will lag demand for the immediate future. So therefore, having short-term regulatory interventions is out of step, is what you said. But then on your recommendation number 3 is you want the government to refund the IZEV incentive program. So to me, those are inconsistent, because that if the issue is that there is more demand than supply, then why do we need an incentive for that? The demand is there, the cars will get bought, people have the money to buy the Teslas. Why do we need the incentive program at all?
Well, the demand is there because the incentive is there. And I think that's what's been proven in British Columbia and to a lesser extent in Quebec. British Columbia had a market penetration of about 9% ZEVs because they've had an incentive in place for the last many number of years. And then that is now stackable with the federal incentive. And the same is true in Quebec as well. Some might say, well, I mean, is an incentive a good thing or a bad thing? I think Mr. Wedrick makes a good point about, if you do the analysis in terms of cost per ton, is this the megaton reduction? Is this the best mechanism to spend money on? Maybe, maybe not. But the reality is from the automotive industry that those vehicles will not sell unless there is an incentive in place.
Merci. Thank you. We'll go to Ms. O'Connell. Ms. O'Connell, are you ready to
Hi.
to take part?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I was able to log back in. Sorry about that. I'm having Wi-Fi issues. So I want to first just pick up on this idea that was exchanged in the last round, that somehow incentives support, purchases of $55,000 but not $25,000 of vehicles. They absolutely would. This notion is absolutely ridiculous. There's an upset limit. So I just want to clarify that for the record. The other point that I think is important is the incentives to ensure that manufacturers are in fact investing in Canada. I come from Durham region where GM is here, and there are manufacturers across this country that were on the verge of closing and all those workers being laid off if it wasn't for electric vehicles and retooling in our country. So I find it a bit rich, especially from the Conservatives, when they talk about taxpayers and protections, but they don't seem to care about the workers who are actually making these vehicles in our community and in our country. So I just want to start off with that point, because I forget that it's actually taxpayers receiving the benefits of these incentives as well, not to mention the environmental benefits. So on this point, I want to ask the question, perhaps Mr. Adams, you can answer, but in some of our briefing documents, we have information that manufacturers could lose approximately $12,000 US per vehicle just from, kind of retooling, resetting or reestablishing these vehicles within their fleet. Is that a figure you would agree with, number one? And number two, do you or the industry have an idea of when that loss could over time be, I guess, somewhat be incorporated into the normal course of business, which would reduce costs overall and then reduce some of the need for these incentives to encourage manufacturers to move to electric vehicles?
Sure. I guess what I would start by saying is I don't believe at this point right now that there's any manufacturer that is making money on a zero emission vehicle. The quantum of what that inherent loss, I guess, is debatable, but there have been public figures that have been out there in the neighborhood of sort of, I've seen sort of $9,000 to $15,000, something like that. And again, it would depend on the vehicle. As you know, the chief source of cost in the vehicle is the battery. So when the battery cost comes down significantly, which it is doing rapidly, then we'll get to a situation where we're coming into cost parity, where to Mr. Wedrick's point, we wouldn't need a subsidy anymore, an incentive, because the vehicles would cost the same amount.
Thank you. And does the industry, or do you have some idea of time frame where you would be at a position of cost neutrality, if not profit, obviously would be ultimately the goal?
Well, let me just say, I guess in terms of cost parity, ICE vehicle versus electric vehicle, there are numerous I guess dates out there, but by the end of this decade is generally conceived to be as a fairly accurate time frame.
Thank you. And Mr. Breton, if I could ask you a question in terms of, you talked about California being a leader, and frankly, there are other countries and jurisdictions around the world. Can you speak to any jurisdiction that has successfully integrated, built up domestic production of EVs without offering consumer incentives to change consumer purchasing patterns?
I haven't. I can't. All of them have included. I mean, to us, what we see as the best pattern is to have rebates, subsidies for the purchase of electric vehicles, but regulation as well, so that they go hand in hand. But to the the last question that you asked, I remember when Toyota came out with the Prius 23 years ago. They said you'll never make money out of this, and the former VP of GM said this is a joke. It's a PR stunt, And now there are over 10 million hybrid vehicles sold. They're making a lot of money. They're saying they're making money with them. And to quote someone from Ford, they said the first Mustang Mach-E that will be out on the market in a few months will make money.
Merci.
So it's not in 10 years from now, it's right now.
Merci. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Madame Beauvais.
Oui, alors.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Breton, I was just going to ask you this question, a loss of, that they lose money It said these companies, but I thought they were making big profits. So thank you. In the long version of your document, I see a figure that you included that was quite impressive. The sales figures for 2021 is up to $180 billion in terms of the sale of electric buses and so on for transportation. When you take a look at EVs, you do have a tendency to focus on cars, but no, we have school buses and we also have city buses that use this technology. And there's some 5 million. Quebec represents about 50% of the EV market in Canada. Quebec represents 23% of the light-duty vehicles that have been bought. Perhaps at some point the rest of Canada will be able to catch up with Quebec. But if you multiply that figure, 1.5 million, by the number of light-duty vehicles in Canada, you're going to see what the sales figures are. The Infrastructure Bank of Canada is interested in promoting the transportation side of heavy-duty vehicles. Now, they're talking about $3.8 billion by 2030. If you multiply that by electricity in Canada, $9 billion is the result. So that represents about $180 billion in sales. Well, okay, you've convinced me. I didn't make the calculations, Mr. Breton, but I'm sure that your data is certainly very well-founded and solid. Thank you. My time's already up, but I owe you 10 seconds. 20 seconds from the last. 10 seconds from the last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Mr. Adams. So we have the ZEV mandate, which is on the supply side, and we have the ZEV incentives on the demand side. And those are driving sales. I think that's something that you recognized in your remarks. And at the same time, we know that 80% of electric vehicles are produced in the jurisdictions where they're sold. And right now, there's $300 billion being invested in EV manufacturing. Why wouldn't Canada want a piece of that? Why wouldn't we want the jobs and the prosperity and the community well-being that comes with those excellent jobs? And following back, don't these policies contribute to that goal of getting that economic development in our country?
Well, I'll just say that you're wise to look for those jobs and for that economic activity. I guess I would just counter what you said in terms of your statistics may be right, but in Canada, 85% of what we build goes somewhere else, and that somewhere else is the United States. So really only about 15% of what the 5 companies that manufacture in Canada produce stays in Canada. So for the recent announcements, for instance, that Ford and Daimler Chrysler made about electric vehicles, they're counting on those vehicles being able to be sold in the United States. And I think might have been a different story under the previous administration, and we'll see what happens under this administration. But I would say to your first point that what's been driving sales in Canada to date has been incentives and not mandates. People say, well, BC has a mandate. Well, that regulation was just passed, as you know from where you live, in July. So the mandate has had no effect yet. It's been all incentives that have been driving demand to date.
40 seconds.
Okay, 40 seconds. I don't know. I wanted to ask a question of Mr. Picard about Ballard, because I feel like he's been left out of this exchange. But a wonderful BC company, I wanted to ask you about the niche that hydrogen fills. Is it a competing technology with battery electric, or is there a unique niche in transportation? Briefly, please.
I think it's complements. I think we see hydrogen to complement battery electric vehicle, and so especially for heavy duty application, for bus, coaches, and trucks, that's really where hydrogen will add value to the users. So
Thank
we really
you.
see that as not complementing, but adding.
Thank you.
We would support that 100%.
Okay, Mr. Generou for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us here today. You know, before I get to my my questions here, just to make a counterpoint to the Liberal member who said that taxpayers are the people who are receiving these incentives. Look at what who the taxpayers are that are receiving these incentives, particularly not the ones who are spending $50,000 for a car. And I think that's essentially what we're trying to get at this study, is that there's some of these cars like the Tesla Model 3, as was indicated by Mr. Woodrick, that are just completely out of the price range of many families. At least in my riding here in Edmonton, Alberta, it's a challenge to be able to afford those cars. You know, I think again it's well intentioned, and to echo the comments of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, this is a well-intentioned program, and I do believe that the more vehicles, more electric vehicles on the road is again a good intention. However, what we're seeing is that just with the way that this was set up and then amended was even more ridiculous to get those models that are out of the price range of the average family. You know, an average Caravan, a simple Google search, a Dodge Caravan puts you at $30,000. Yeah, are we getting these vehicles off the road? Are we getting the F-150s off the road? The vehicles that maybe are the high emitters with this incentive? I would argue likely not. It's looking at those taxpayers who can afford those higher model vehicles. So I think this program has completely missed the mark in that regard. Mr. Woodrick, we had somebody before our committee. I think it was one of the Pembina Institute that actually said more incentives would be the answer to this particular program to make it more attractive to Canadians. Could you comment on perhaps their comments that providing more money for this program would be the answer?
Well, I think first of all, under the current program, absolutely not. I mean, you're talking. I already gave you the statistics for the low end vehicle at 126 of the base model, the specific model that Tesla introduced to trigger the subsidy for the higher version. They only sold 126. They sold 12,000 of the $55,000 model. So with all due respect to Ms. O'Connell, if you can buy a $50,000 vehicle, I'm not sure that the average Canadian would say you're the one that needs the $5,000 subsidy. You can make the case for cheaper vehicles, but of course there aren't that many vehicles that are EVs that are in that price point, and that is the whole reason for this subsidy in the first place. So I think if you are going to look at ways to increase incentives, you have to target them at the people who could really use the help, and where it will actually make the difference between, do I want to buy a vehicle that's $25,000 that's a combustion engine, or do I want to spend the same amount on something that's cleaner?
Yeah, I guess getting to that the point of where again we both feel it's well intentioned, but getting to the point of where this is actually making a difference on the roads. There's moves to getting to 100% electric vehicles by, I believe it was 2040. The government was looking at to get there. It's how do we make that average for the middle class Canadian to be able to afford those? Again, if you go into the dealership and say, look, there's a $30,000 minivan there, or maybe that Tesla over there looks pretty attractive to the family. You know what? Probably going to make the decision to go with the minivan and hope that the price comes down at some point in your lifetime. So, I guess getting to a question is now the right time for these incentives, or is it waiting for that supply and demand to really equal out?
Yeah, I think that is the big question that the committee and the government needs to ask itself. And I think that how much will it move the needle? I think the challenge right now is that we're just not quite there yet. When I think of myself looking for a new vehicle, the main barrier to buying the EV is the price. That is the only barrier, and it is nowhere near the price range. And even the $5,000 doesn't move the needle that much. So I wish that we had more price competitive ZEVs right now, but we don't, and I don't know that the 5,000 incentive is going to move the needle so much as to justify the cost.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Saini. Mr. Generou, I'll give you an extra 10 seconds if you're up again.
I'm okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair. My treat to you.
Thank you. I'll bank it.
I'll take his 10 seconds. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for everyone coming today. I just wanted to follow up with you, Mr. Breton, because it seems that Mr. Adams has a different opinion on ZEV mandates, and your organization has a different opinion on ZEV mandates. Whatever reading I've done, that the jurisdictions that have ZEV mandates tend to have more sales, and where the cars are made or deployed, the uptake is higher in that jurisdiction. Now we see China with the mandates, and that's why the investment there has been growing. Companies are going there because they know that they will have a market. If you look at the European Union right now, they're thinking of having mandates right now. They're voluntary right now, but they're thinking going in a more concerted direction. So I just want to, we heard Mr. Adams' opinion. I just want to hear, what do you think, why do you think ZEV mandates work?
Because manufacturers send the vehicles where there are mandates. It's as simple as that. I can give you two examples. I mean, right now, if you want to purchase a Toyota RAV4 Prime, you'll be able to get it in Quebec because there's a ZEV mandate, and you won't be able to get it elsewhere in Canada. And I can give you an even better example than that. In 2011, okay, the federal government and the Ontario government financed the assembly of the Toyota RAV4 electric. It was built in Woodstock, Ontario. Because there was no mandate in Canada, but there was a mandate in California, all these vehicles were shipped to California, and no one in Canada had access to these vehicles. So I think it's really interesting now that the government of Canada and Ontario is investing in the assembly of electric vehicles. But we have, as Mr. Adams said, these are made to be shipped in the US. And with the Biden government that intends to be more and more aggressive regarding EVs, I think that there's a chance that if we don't have a mandate on the federal level, well, these vehicles will be sent to the US or Quebec or BC, and the dealers in Ontario or Manitoba or Saskatchewan, Alberta won't be able to get these vehicles. And it's a real issue.
So you're suggesting that the mandate and with incentives, you would probably see an uptick in the market?
Absolutely. That's what we've seen elsewhere.
The other question I have for you, Mr. Breton, because you mentioned mining in part of your opening remarks, and right now, as you know, that as ZEV vehicles start increasing in production, the usage of cobalt and lithium and other precious minerals will also be mined more heavily. But eventually, we're going to reach a point where either you will have ZEV vehicles that are retiring off the road, or you've reached a critical mass. How do you think the recycling part of that will work?
Actually, there's two very interesting companies in Canada that work on recycling batteries. And now they have technologies that can recycle up to 95% of the components. So that's very good, first of all. And one thing you cannot recycle is oil. Once it's burnt, that's it. So there's a real market for that. It's coming to fruition. But right now, one of the problems that we have with recycling is very simple. There's not enough batteries. Batteries last longer than we expected. Batteries for electric vehicles are either warranted between 8 to 10 years, between 160 to 240,000 kilometers. So they last a lot longer than we originally thought. Actually, my first hybrid vehicle that I bought 20 years ago, I still have the original battery in it.
Thank you for those remarks, Mr. Breton. I'd like to move to Mr. Pocard because I wanted to get a little bit more insight from you regarding hydrogen. I mean, you said it's complementary to electric cars, but what I've read is that the sort of production of hydrogen is still very expensive and can be cost prohibitive. What can we do to bring the cost down so that could be another alternative to electrical cars?
Very good question. I think we need to separate the vehicle from the energy source. So vehicle on the fuel cell, it is all manufacturing, volume will get down on the price, and all the studies show that the price of a fuel cell engine will be comparable manufacturing or cheaper than manufacturing a diesel engine. Your question addressed the energy. So electric, you directly use electricity and to recharge your battery. On a fuel cell electric vehicle, you use energy carrier hydrogen in order to store the energy on board of your vehicle. Now, hydrogen can be produced two ways. Either you use today, I would say 95% of the hydrogen produced worldwide come from derivative of natural gas and these production plants in Canada here. Now, this ways is you don't reduce all the emission. So you have a, kind of a carbon intense hydrogen. So the challenge is to be able to reduce that intensity by doing carbon sequestration. And in Canada today, you have companies, and it's done already today in Alberta, where you can take natural gas stream, remove the carbon component of it during the production of hydrogen, and store that or use that in industrial feed.
Parfait. Merci. Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
The cost of parity with diesel.
Oui, merci. Merci.
Thank you. Very interesting, technologically speaking. We'll get into the third round, Mr. Gaudin. Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Breton, I'll give you the opportunity to answer the question that I asked a little while ago. But all witnesses, let me just ask, first of all, to Mr. Adams. Tomorrow morning, say, the government would decide to cut off the subsidies for zero emission vehicles. What would the industry do?
The answer to that is, what would Canadians do? And I think Ontario provided a good example when the Ford government rescinded the subsidies. Electric vehicle sales fell 45%. So I think that's what happens. So then if those vehicles are sitting on lots, then I suppose at some point they may or may not sell, depending on how interested people were in purchasing them at their real cost. The reality is, though, is that if there weren't incentives in place, then probably it's not the manufacturers, it's the dealers. They will order and sell what consumers want to buy.
Okay.
I have another question. Tomorrow morning, say, I want to order a car in BC or Quebec, but there's a waiting list. It might take 2, 3, 4, or maybe even 6 months because there's a market for that kind of car. What bothers me in this whole process is this. The automobile industry is asking for help in the development of business. I know there is investment, but I am convinced that industry is doing what it's doing because it's seen an opportunity in doing so. Here's my question. Instead of helping consumers and helping builders, why couldn't we have an awareness heightening campaign for Canadians that would make them more aware of what the environment could be done with the environment? What do you think? Would that be all right?
That wholeheartedly, because I think there's really, if you look at a stool with 3 legs to it, one leg is incentives, another leg would be infrastructure, and the third leg would be a broad educational campaign. And I think that's been proven time and time again that we need more education about electric and hydrogen vehicles.
Mr. Breton, I come back to you. Tell me this. The electric network during the winter period has difficulties. Canada is a large territory. We have areas of extreme cold. Now tell me this. Is the network ready and able to answer the needs if we drove EVs? Well, that's an interesting question, because what people don't realize is that there are more and more electric vehicles that are pre-programmed to adapt to climate, to change, to weather changes. 7 in the morning to 7 at night, there's a great demand for electricity, so we can pre-program an EV to recharge when electricity is not at a peak point, when it's cheaper. I'm talking about electricity. A few years ago, I was in a place where very often not enough electricity, and my battery was used as a source to make my fridge run. Because I needed electricity, I was able to recharge my battery when it ran low. So a gas-based vehicle can't do that. While you are demonstrating to me that there's another service that we can achieve with EVs and zero-emission vehicles, vehicle to grid, for example, vehicle to home, they can be used as a source of the energy that you need for other purposes. Thank you. I'm really learning things at my age. I just now would like to look towards hydrogen. Mr. Pocard, we haven't forgotten about you. I think that your sector is a sector that is very interesting, but is not familiar to a lot of Canadians. Why don't you can't make any breakthroughs? Why can't you make any breakthroughs in terms of the development of your technology in the minds of Canadians? I feel that you're being timid. You're talking about what you do as complementary to other sources of energy, but an EV, very quickly, please, Mr. Pocard. That's an excellent question, and I think we've started to be a bit more forward with respect to the technology. The hydrogen, a fuel cell, is something that does complement the other sources of fuel. There is a great deal of development in this area, and thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Baker, please, 5 minutes.
Mr. Baker? He's not on? Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Mr. McLeod. Sorry, Mr. McLeod.
Chair, I think that was Mr. Shifke.
Okay. Mr. Shifke? Okay, Mr. Shifke.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you so much, Chair.
Is it Mr. Shifke or Mr. McLeod? Mr. Shifke.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a member from Quebec, and my province is very rich in natural resources like lithium, which is very much needed in our society. The Minister of Innovation Science, Navdeep Bains, has said that Canada should support the development of purchasing chains for these batteries in Canada to promote the use of lithium batteries in the province. For Mr. Breton, what would be useful for the federal government to do to encourage the development of these supply chains in Canada? Thank you very much for your question. The program, Strategic Innovation, that was announced is a very important one. I think that Mr. Baines came to our annual conference 2 weeks ago, of course, to speak about the interest and the potential to create a national industry in the area of transportation. I think that the different provinces have to work in coordination. There are forces in Quebec, Ontario, BC, and Manitoba. But if we could coordinate amongst ourselves rather than compete, it would be better. Clearly, I believe that a support program for innovation is extremely important. The Infrastructure Bank of Canada allows for the acquisition of school buses, urban transit buses. That's an important program as well. I think that if we get back to the grassroots, to fundamentals, I think that we will be able to promote the purchase of electric vehicles. It's very simple. We're looking at innovation here. When you see EVs on the road, you see what General Motors and Tesla have been saying recently, that there has to be a parity. So with innovation, with a Rebel that is an EV vehicle, well, that will have a spill-off on the health sector and other sectors. You want to be sure, and it was in the speech from the throne, if I'm not mistaken, that Canada is amongst the leaders in clean technology in the world. Thank you, Mr. Breton.
To what impact the Conservative cuts in Ontario with regards to to subsidies for electric vehicles, the fact they don't have a mandate for electric vehicles by 2030, 2040, or 2050. What impact is that going to have on the typical family in Ontario being able to have access to and afford an electric vehicle? And what impact is it going to have on the Ontario government's ability to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions because of that?
The question's for me again?
Yes.
Okay. I think that Minister Ford, Premier Ford, I think has missed a great opportunity to be able to be a leader in North America because, I mean, they have a lot of OEMs in Ontario. And in their economic update a few weeks ago, they said that they wanted to be a leader in the building of electric vehicles in Ontario, but they don't set the example. There's no rebate. They don't have anything to support infrastructure installation. So I think that there is a great opportunity for Ontario. There is a great opportunity for Canada, but we have to be aligned because what's happening right now is that there's discrepancies that makes for Ontario to be lagging behind BC, for instance.
And so what we're looking at essentially is a situation where Ontario may produce a large number of electric vehicles, but the people literally living a kilometer away from that plant may not actually be able to access those vehicles because there are no subsidies in place and because there's no mandate. Those automobiles are going to be shipped to other jurisdictions, Quebec, British Columbia, California, where there are those incentives, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And I was talking about Toyota, but we could say the same about Subaru because Subaru sells their plug-in hybrid vehicle in Quebec and in the Ottawa region, but not elsewhere in Canada because there's a mandate in Quebec. So it's a real issue because I know a lot of people outside Quebec and outside BC say, I want to buy an electric car, but I can't get one because there's none on the lot. And when you are a dealer, you know, you have to make sales. And if someone comes to your dealer,
Merci.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent answer. Excellent answer, and we certainly have understood the essential of what you were saying. 2.5 minutes, Madame Posé. Thank you very much. I would like to come back to you, Mr. Woolrick. You say in your document that taxpayers' dollars are very precious. I will bring back the question I asked at the outset. With respect to the fossil fuel sector, it received $600 million from the federal government in 2019-2020. You answered earlier on Trans Mountain, but there are also fossil fuel subsidies that have been given. Don't you see the difference between EVs that will help us reach the reduction goals for GHGs and have a positive spillover on health and subsidies for this type of thing?
Thank you for the question. Well, let me be clear. We oppose those two. We do not say you should subsidize fossil fuels and not subsidize EVs. We say you shouldn't subsidize either of them. And when it comes to EVs, again, the question is the value for the dollar. There are other measures you can take. Is spending this money getting you the greatest reduction for the dollar? And I'm suggesting that there's been no evidence that this program is getting you the best bang for your buck in terms of reduction.
Well, it seems to me that I've given you figures earlier, and others have spoken to that. It still isn't convincing for me. Mr. Pokal, let me come back to you. Hydrogen, I've heard about in certain Zoom meetings that I've attended. It's very important, I guess, for trucks, for transportation, particularly. And for you, are all forms of hydrogen equal? Some can be very polluting, but there is also green hydrogen. You're quite right. If you want to have a positive impact on GHGs, hydrogen has to be decarbonized. That's what you have to use. It can be done through electrolysis to become a renewable energy through wind, or the production on the basis of natural gas. It's by sequestration as well. And you have hydrogen that is highly carbonized. Thank you. I'm going to try to maybe have a fourth round if we could just do so. well, 20 seconds and the 10 seconds add up. Well, I'm doing my utmost, madam.
Mr. Bachrach.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Breton, I wanted to ask you about economies of scale and how they play into this whole picture. We've heard a lot about the price of electric vehicles, and I agree that price is one of the barriers that might prevent people from buying a new electric vehicle. Although I think if you look at it from a full cost accounting perspective and you count in the maintenance costs and the low operating costs of using these vehicles, the price is at least a wash, if not in favor of EVs. But this seems to me like a change that's going to happen inevitably. These vehicles are cheaper to run, they're more fun to drive, especially the light duty category. Are we simply just talking about priming the pump with these incentives? And to what degree could the incentives actually be temporary once the market size gets big enough to drive down price by itself, because we have that economy of scale? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, I see. You know what you're talking about because you have an EV and you drive an EV. Listen, total cost of ownership is really important, and very often people think about the purchase price, but they forget the energy price, the insurance price, the maintenance price, and the resale value. And very often, when you start adding these numbers, I'm surprised that Mr. Woodrick, would say, people can afford it. But when you start to add all the calculations, in the end, an EV can be just as affordable as a Honda Civic. So it's really surprising to hear that. And when we talk about taxpayers, because this is very important, I want to mention one thing. Okay, if we create jobs with electric vehicles, from light to heavy duty, from infrastructure to research to mining, that's people with good jobs, good paying jobs, who will pay taxes. So in the end, we have to look beyond just the subsidy for the purchase of an electric vehicle. It's all ecosystem that we're thinking, because we're looking at a new industry altogether. So we have to think beyond just the price of the vehicle. We have to look at, as you said, total cost of ownership. And we think that it's very important. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but in 2012, Barack Obama, when he was president of the United States, he said there's been subsidies in the US for oil and gas companies for 100 years. If we can get subsidies for just 10 years, I think we'll be okay, because by then the price will be at par at least.
50.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Breton. I was just thinking that, we're on the brink of this massive technological shift, and we're probably going to look back on this debate in 50 years and laugh a bit to ourselves. I certainly hope that we do, because I think we're going to get to that point very soon where these incentives are no longer needed.
Okay, Mr. Godin. See Monsieur Godin? No?
Mr. Godin? It's not Mr. Godin. Monsieur Redekop.
Thank you. Just to pick up quickly on that with Mr. Breton. Are you saying, I saw, I think in your notes, 500,000 jobs created from this. Are you saying those are new incremental jobs plus 500,000? Because it seems to me that we'll be losing jobs on the production of ICE vehicles, and they will be, in a sense, replaced with production of EVs. And so is it truly a plus 500,000, or is there some netting going on there?
Okay. Well, there's net new jobs in electric vehicles. And from my point of view and many people's point of view, if we don't make the switch towards electric vehicle production in Canada, whether it's light or heavy duty, well, I doubt there will be an automotive sector in 15 to 20 years from now in Canada, whether it's for light or heavy duty, because we're going towards electric vehicles anyway. So, so we're thinking about saving jobs and creating new jobs, whether it's for infrastructure providers, whether it's for utilities, whether it's for research and development and mining. I mean, there are some mines that were closed that they're opening up back again because of electric vehicles. So
okay,
there's a lot of new jobs.
Yeah, and I think the important point there is that this is not necessarily incremental tax revenues, as you said, though, because we're just saving jobs, which means we're keeping those jobs in Canada, and there may be some incremental too. But I think it's important to note that. But I want to go to Mr. Adams and talk about non-tariff trade barriers. In October, I asked Environment Canada if any of the regulations that they do are being checked against our international treaties, and the answer that I got back was no, it's not their responsibility. Ask Global Affairs. And so it just makes me wonder if Environment Canada is creating regulations that will, they're not considering our trade treaties. That's a concern, I believe. And you represent automakers from across the globe. They have maybe head offices not in Canada, but operations here. Members of, they're covered by different trade treaties that we have, like CETA, TPP, et cetera. Does it concern you that Environment Canada is putting in regulations without concern for the non-tariff trade barriers that might be created because of that?
Well, trade is an interesting subject, and I think oftentimes what's been raised in front of this committee is the number of models that are available in Canada for EVs, for instance, and there's so many other models that are available elsewhere in the world, and I think Canada, for a long time, has subscribed to harmonizing or aligning its safety standards and its emission standards with those of the United States. So to the extent that we're tied with the United States, then chances are we're only going to get product offerings that meet both the safety standards and the emission standards of the United States. And that makes sense because the automotive industry is a regional industry. There's North American industry, there's a European industry, and an Asian industry. But to your point, because there are different standards, not necessarily better or worse, but different, that does preclude some models from coming into the Canadian marketplace.
Is it true that because of if there's a regulation in Canada that causes you to have to, let's throw something out, that there needs to be a certain Canadian content in a battery, let's say, and that car is currently produced in Japan or somewhere, so that's now imported, it creates increased costs for Canadians, does it not? And if those regulations aren't standardized properly, Canadians just end up paying more. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement. If you look at the recent USMCA CUSMA trade agreement, that basically was looking to try and bring more manufacturing into the North American region. And I think a reality of doing so is that products, especially automobiles that are made in the North American region, will cost more because of the supply chain realignment that had to take place to accommodate the provisions, the content provisions of the new USMCA agreement.
Another question I have, Mr. Breton had said that a ZEV mandate is unavoidable. And he said OEMs are not responding to consumer demand. I worked in the manufacturing industry for quite a number of years, and I know what's involved in designing and bringing a new vehicle to market. Maybe could you comment a little bit on that? OEMs are not responding to consumer demand?
Well, I think they are. As I noted in my remarks, between now and 2025, my own members, it's my 15 members, are going to have more than 125 models in the marketplace. And it's an issue of timing, as I indicated before. And I think just in terms of a key indicator, the ZEV program, my ZEV program that's been put in place, the vast majority of those funds that were intended to last 3 years have already been fully subscribed to by consumers.
Okay.
So to say that there's no demand, I think the data refutes that.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. McLeod?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I've been listening with interest, and I appreciate all the people that presented here today. I think my question is going to be to Mr. Breton. I had opportunity to drive a hybrid vehicle, and I test drove it in the town of Inuvik, which is quite far north, the northern part of the Northwest Territories. And it was minus 32 when I got the vehicle. And that night when I parked it at the hotel, it went down to minus 37. And the next morning, the vehicle was no different than when I parked it. It started up, it fired up, no problem. It was the same as a regular, and it was a truck. It was a half-ton truck. And it was no different than a regular vehicle, except it had an electric motor, or it was a hybrid. It was quieter, it was had quicker response, and I really enjoyed the vehicle. I think, given that I live in the north, where most contractors, industry, be it oil and gas or mining, drive the larger 1-ton trucks or half-ton trucks, even, and they start them in October and they let them run right till March. They don't shut them off. Usually they're diesel trucks. Yeah. A lot of people would like to see that the idling time reduced, and that includes governments. But the cost of the batteries are so significant. I mean, the batteries are lasting longer. They could last 8 years plus, but they cost up to 25% of what the vehicle costs. But I understand there's lots of different batteries in the market, more coming on all the time, and we probably have more battery scientists than we've ever had in our history. I wanted to ask you, with your knowledge, did you see something down the road? Was it a graphite battery? Is it a mechanical battery? Is there something that we can look down into the future and say there is something that can be purchased
Do the
for
job?
electric vehicles?
Yeah,
I'll leave it
absolutely.
with you.
Okay, absolutely. Well, first of all, I had a trip about minus 25, when I went to Saguenay from Berthierville, where I live, and we had no problem whatsoever. And actually, when it's really cold, it's a lot easier to start an electric vehicle than to start a gas vehicle. We had to boost a few gas vehicles when we did some tests in the past winters. So I understand absolutely what you're saying. To your point, yes, General Motors, Tesla, and others are working on, like third generation batteries, which will have 50% more energy density, so a lot more range, and it will be 50 to 60% cheaper by 2024, 2025. So, I mean, this is very, very close from now. And after that, 2026, 2027, we're thinking about solid state batteries, which have, which are the next generation batteries, which will have even more range. We're talking about 800, 1,000 kilometers with the 5 to 15 minutes to recharge. So things are evolving really quickly. And with the likes of Professor Jeff Dan at Dalhousie University, that works with Tesla, with Karim Zaib that worked at IREC, and Hydro-Québec, and others in Canada. There's huge progress being made with battery technology nowadays and battery manufacturing as well. So I think that the pickup trucks are going to be a lot more affordable than people think when you calculate the total cost of ownership. And they're coming to market in like 2021, 2022. So it's tomorrow. And I know a lot of people who work in construction who are interested in buying electric pickup trucks because they know how expensive they are in gas.
Yeah, I wanted to ask another question regarding the incentives. I find that there's so little knowledge about the zero emission vehicles. We live in the north here, and there's not a lot of zero emission vehicles, but there is a huge need. We have really low greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time, we have a lot of vehicles idling. A lot of vehicles idling in the north, and I don't know if most sectors and industries, including and governments, would actually buy and test these vehicles, without the incentive. I think the education component is really needed. I think this is beyond the cost of the vehicle, as you said, and we need subsidies to get people comfortable with the zero emission vehicles. We need to be able to make sure that people know. For us, we need to be able to know that we will be able to have people that can do repairs. We've got to be able to know that, yes, we can get parts for the vehicle. We need to know that people can make money with charging stations. All these things. But without incentives, I don't think we'll ever get there.
No, that's a good comment, but we won't have time for an answer. We can squeeze in a fourth round if we reduce the time of questions, and I figure if we do 4-4-2-2-4-4, we'll get it done. We start with Mr. Hoback for 4 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and it's been fascinating listening to this. I got excited. I was at a consumer electronics show in Las Vegas about 5 years ago, and they're talking about their charging stations, and they're just starting to introduce these cars. And the talk then, of course, is the grid and how we're going to support that and all the things that we're going to need around this new technology. And that leads to my first question in regards to when we look at this becoming more common on our streets, when there's a car accident, when there's a situation where we have to have emergency response attending these vehicles. Is there anything that they should be looking at now and putting into their inventories to handle, let's say, a rollover or a vehicle accident or something like that?
Who's the question for?
You know, I'll let you guys all know the industry very well, so I'm just kind of curious what you both think.
Well, actually, there are training now for firemen and emergency people regarding to electric vehicles. But if you're talking about rollovers, they're really rare because the weight of the battery being at the bottom of the vehicle is actually a lot more stable than a normal gas vehicle, especially when you're talking about SUVs. But they are giving training nowadays for emergency people and firemen, that work in the industry, so that they can manage, everything related to wiring.
Exactly. So, so then you look at that end of it. We've got to prepare not just the guy who's buying the car and the people producing the car, but all the areas around it that support the whole automotive sector. And I know Mr. McLeod kind of talked a little bit about that too. You know, one of the other things I was kind of curious about is these batteries, when they go in vehicles, they have a duty life cycle. I think that's the appropriate way to call it. And there comes a time when they're no good for a vehicle, but they still have life left in them.
Yeah.
And they could be used somewhere else. So how are we making sure that there's commonality so we can take that battery out of a vehicle and, let's say, put it into a fridge or the house or something like that, and they get the full value out of the house or out of the battery? I'm sorry.
Well, you can make energy storage, so you pile up batteries from electric vehicles and you do energy storage where, for instance, you're away from a grid and where you get energy from, let's say, solar power or wind power. We've seen that in Hawaii. We see that elsewhere. So that these batteries can last a lot longer. So they have their second life as storage components. And after that, they can be recycled up to 95%. So a battery can last 20 to 30 years.
So my question then comes back to, and maybe the automotive sector can answer this better, are we seeing some commonality in the construction of these batteries so they actually can unplug from the car and plug into the house? Are we seeing some commonality so that, that can actually happen? Is that actually in the design criteria for these batteries at this point in time? Is that something that's being talked about as they go and develop these batteries?
I might just say that there's standards being developed for the secondary use cycle, and Mr. Patin is correct in terms of saying how they can be used afterwards. And really, most people don't know that there's a lot of life left. It's 80%. Once a battery depletes below 80%, it's no longer useful as a car battery, but has a number of years left use as a secondary source.
Okay, then it goes, and you say number of years, so it could go into a house for 10 years. I guess it depends on the battery and the size and everything else. But I guess what I don't want to see is, I'm a farm kid, and I can remember the days when I used to hook up our hydraulics, and a John Deere tractor had a different set of hydraulic lands than a Case tractor had, and different then. So I want to make sure that we have some commonality. And one of the things about the USMCA which I thought was really a potential, and maybe we've missed it, is by creating a North American regulations, by having everything done in North America and being first at it. Our volumes are so big that it forces the other parts of the world to actually take on our regulations, and that becomes the norm and gives us the manufacturing advantage here in North America. Are we actually going to be able to accomplish that?
10-second answer, please. Well, actually, it's sort of a yes or no, really.
Well, no, we don't. We actually don't have the dominant regulatory standard.
Okay.
There are other standards around the world that are
Okay, thank you.
North America.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Longfield, who will be splitting with Mr. Saini, so 2 minutes each.
Chair.
Okay, I'll go quick then. With Mr. Adams, I missed you at the beginning of the meeting. I wanted to ask you a question from our auto caucus, and thank you for being there on Monday. We saw sales down all across Canada for vehicles during COVID, and looking at possibly having some type of an incentive program like the Cash for Clunkers that could maybe get us towards ZEVs if we had an incentive to get 12-year-old cars off the road. Could you maybe have a quick comment on that, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Saini.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, we believe that reducing emissions is a multifaceted approach. And in addition to getting more EVs on the road, you also need to address the current fleet, which is much larger by orders of magnitude. And Cash for Clunkers or scrappage program would take care of those vehicles that are 12 years and older and get them off the road.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to all of you again for coming here today. I have more of a philosophical question, and this question is for Mr. Adams and Mr. Breton. I don't need a long answer, but just if we look at what it takes to manufacture a electric vehicle, whether it be the lithium, cobalt, nickel, or copper, those are all minerals that are precious. where we have the mining capacity to do it in an environmentally sustainable way, yet we're importing these products, but for our own defense capacity, for our own national security, could this not be a way of incentivizing other industries to make sure that we protect our national security here at home?
Want to go ahead, Mr. Adams?
National security in the sense of the raw materials you're referring to?
Yes.
Well, certainly. I mean, I think if electrification, electric vehicle manufacturing is going to take place, it makes sense that a corollary of that is having battery manufacturing in Canada too, because it's too expensive to move those from one jurisdiction to another. So I would just say yes, it makes sense that you would want to try and develop the whole supply chain.
I agree with Mr. Adams. I think that there's a case to be made regarding geopolitical implications of, we've seen that with oil in the past. So I think that for batteries to be made with minerals from North America and Canada, for instance, for example, I think is strategically very important. We've seen that with COVID. I mean, it was hard to get pieces from Asia. Right now, most batteries are made in Asia. So if you want to be more independent in a sense, we cannot be totally independent. We have to be codependent, especially in North America. But I think it makes sense to have batteries made with minerals from Canada and the US for the North American market. Geopolitically makes sense.
Thank you very much. And I want to pass the rest of my time to MP O'Connell.
Okay. Well, there's not a lot of time left. I had Ms. O'Connell on the list anyway at the end.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Chair,
okay.
I can go to the next round.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, okay.
We'll get to you, Ms. O'Connell. Madame Posey.
Oui. Yes, thanks. My question is for Mr. Adams. In your document, you say at a certain point that the short-term regulatory intervention is not following the medium to long-term outlook for the industry. I think that it is the builders that really are not following the reality. In 2008, I wanted to buy an EV, but a dealership convinced me not to buy one, and then they made me buy one that ran on gas. I wonder about the type of information that is given to the sellers in the dealerships to promote EVs.
Well, I think that's an area that we can always improve upon, is the education not only of the public but also of the dealerships. As you know, the dealerships are independent businesses of the vehicle manufacturers. Dealerships are in business to make money and to sell vehicles, and if they are looking to sell a vehicle, they'll generally try and sell what the consumer is looking for. And probably you were referring maybe to a hybrid in 2008. You know, the reality is that we're at the nascent point of this industry. It's just beginning.
No. Alors non.
No, I really was pointed towards a gas-powered vehicle. But I just wonder about this. From our very first meeting on EVs, several people have told us that the supply of EVs was a real problem. So once again, that problem exists today. I have a question that my Liberal colleague asked earlier, Mr. Saini. In China, in Europe, there is legislation that deals with zero-emission vehicles to accelerate manufacturing and transformation. Would you agree with such legislation here? Very quickly.
Is that to me?
Yes,
I would say no. I mean, China's got the largest, or one of the largest populations in the world. It's got a number of indigenous manufacturers to China. We don't. China is also prescribing that manufacturers not build an ICE vehicle as of 2035. I don't think Canada's in a position to take draconian measures like that.
Mr. Bachrach, for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question for Mr. Woodrick. Mr. Woodrick, you were saying earlier that you represent an organization that's concerned for taxpayers and the costs that taxpayers bear. Health Canada estimates that air pollution, especially in urban areas, causes 14,600 premature deaths every year, and that the social, economic, and public welfare consequences cost taxpayers $114 billion a year. So I'm just wondering if we're talking about incentives for electric vehicles that reduce air pollution as well as climate pollution. Shouldn't we be considering those health benefits of improving air quality when we're looking at the impact on tax-paying citizens?
Sure, and I mean, I don't have any issue with the objective of this policy. My point is, if you have people who are in a position to buy a $55,000 vehicle, are you actually changing many minds by giving them $5,000 taxpayer money? It's great that they buy a cleaner vehicle. It's great that there's health benefits for all of us. But I'm simply questioning whether or not they've analyzed the marginal change in those purchases based on the policy.
I hear you bringing this up again. It's around the efficacy of these incentives, and yet the jurisdictions that are leading in terms of the number of electric vehicles all have these incentives in place. Isn't that a proof point to say that these incentives work to incentivize the purchases?
Well, I've actually heard contradictory things today. I've heard on the one hand that we need the subsidy to stimulate demand, but I've also heard demand so high that people can't find them on the lots. I have heard that the life cycle based on the total cost of the vehicle is comparable to combustion engines. Well, if it's comparable, then why do we need the subsidy? So I mean, I'm hearing contradictions here. And again, I have no issue with ZEVs, and it would be great if we could all drive them and they were all price competitive. I'm simply questioning whether giving $5,000 to people who can afford a $50,000 car is a good use of taxpayer money.
Merci, Monsieur Godin.
Thank you, Mr. Godin. Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Breton, once again, I'm turning to you. I have a question. If you increase the number of ZEVs, earlier on they talked about the electricity, the ability to create enough electricity to meet the demand. And if you suddenly increase the amount of ZEVs on the road, we have a period in which we're going to have to adapt. Do you think that producing these vehicles without charging stations, without an infrastructure, would that be a problem? Or if tomorrow morning the builders were able to create a huge quantity of EVs, would there be an infrastructure built within the 3 following months? Well, no, I don't think that there's many builders that is ever going to be able to meet the demand in a 3-month time period. There are infrastructures that are being built throughout North America all the time, every week. But it's this issue of infrastructure, of the recharging stations that is so important. Some are downtown. There are a lot of people who charge up at home. 80% of the charging is done at home, but somebody who lives in a condo tower can't do it. It's just not a possibility. These are things that the government is going to have to think about, some quick charge stations for people like that. If you want to be able to have a charging stations network in Edmonton, there's a program in Natural Resources Canada to promote charging stations, a network of that, but it's going to take work. The example of Canada, there's the example of Britain, and so on. Thank you very much, Mr. Breton. Perhaps I express myself poorly. I know it's not in the next 3 months that builders are going to be able to produce a quantity of electric vehicles that would mean new charging stations. Mr. Adams now. What do you think, Mr. Adams, about the province of Quebec that wants to limit to zero gas-powered vehicles by 2035? Will the industry be able to respond, or will Quebec be neglected?
That's an interesting question, and I think if you look around the world, lots of different countries are setting targets for banning internal combustion engine vehicles. I think the reality is going to be more what consumers will do. If their choice of the new vehicles that they want to buy is somewhat limited, and they're all EVs, there may be some people that don't want to buy an EV. So what are they going to do? They'll continue to drive their used vehicle, or they'll import a vehicle from elsewhere, and that's not beneficial to Quebec business nor Quebec air quality, I would say, because you're just keeping older vehicles on the road longer.
Alors, je vous invite peut-être à...
Perhaps you could develop your way of producing EVs to accelerate your response to the demand. There are waiting lists in Quebec and in BC. And if there were an increased production order, I'm pretty well convinced that the consumer would be willing to pay the price. It's an issue of availability to my mind. And here you have a beautiful opportunity to move ahead. I'm convinced with the investments and the expenditures that you are making, it would turn a profit for you. What we have to think is that in developing a new product, in introducing a new product, you have to pay costs up front at the outset. But if you are ready to share your profits over the next 10, 15 years, that might justify subsidies. But as is said, people don't want subsidies. But what about sharing the profits in coming years? I'd be very comfortable with that. Thank you. Thank you.
Take us home. You have Ms. O'Connell? You have 4 minutes.
Thank
please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I find, again, I feel compelled to perhaps correct the record of what we heard today for those who may not have understood. The demand and the access is an issue because the EVs are being sent to jurisdictions where there are incentives or regulations. Therefore, incentives and regulations equals demand, which is ultimately helping consumers, ultimately helping the environment, if this is what is I think was called an honorable goal. So without incentives, demand, we've heard testimony, has dropped in the case of Ontario. Where there are incentives, there is demand. So I just felt that point has to be clarified. But my question is to Mr. Pocard. I am sorry you haven't been able to get on, but I did actually have a question for you. I'm not as familiar with your industry as much, so forgive me, but you spoke about support for R&D, which is always great, and I think Canada tends to be a leader in research and development, but where we tend to lack is the commercialization of it. So how, as Canadians, as a Canadian government, can we make investments that would ultimately also help commercialization and then ensure that the what the costs are then passed on to Canadian consumers, because we've talked a lot about this industry, and it's the jurisdictions that are building or manufacturing vehicles that are more affordable in those same jurisdictions. So if we make this investment, how do we commercialize it here so Canadians ultimately reap that benefit for that investment? Outside of the environmental goals, obviously, but on the commercialization and economic goals for the average Canadian?
Well, today, Canada is uniquely placed with companies like Ballard and others in Canada. We really have a leadership on a technology development. And then we are providing today at Ballard, we export 100% of our fuel cell system goes outside of Canada. We sell an engine for US, China, as well as Europe. We need to create, I think, one way to help is to create a demand here in Canada. So as we discussed, everything requesting ZEV mandate, especially for heavy duty mobility, buses on truck, as long as it's technology neutral, and we like to invest on that. So then, as long as it meets the objective of having zero emission, regardless if it's battery electric or fuel cell electric, it doesn't really matter. Canada has a chance to be able here locally to produce fuel cell technology using Canadian IP and workers here. Doesn't require a lot of minerals imports or anything. It's just standard construction material. So we have an opportunity to build on this industry here, but we need to create the demand on vehicles. So whenever we have opportunity with those 5,000 zero emission buses, we need to make sure that both technology, battery electric and fuel electric, have a chance to be deployed, and it's up to the user to define what technology fits the best for the use case, and it's where heavy duty trucks, long road transportation, longer route coaches, where hydrogen provides that path to decarbonization and zero emission mobility.
Merci. We only have
So
we only have 15 seconds left for a comment, maybe, Ms. O'Connell.
I just wanted to clarify to make sure that it's not as much of the front end R&D, it's more of the demand investment that is needed.
Perfect.
Yes,
Thank
absolutely.
you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bien, été vraiment.
Well, thank you. This was a fascinating meeting. We had the opportunity to ask very good questions. Mr. Chair, Mr. Shifke, on a point of information just before closing, perhaps this is something we could address. We would like to thank our guests, of course, but I think in terms of future meetings, if we want to have a meeting on Monday, yes, I will answer that. But I just wanted to say, though, that we had some excellent answers to our questions, and for me, it has really been food for thought. Monday, that will, Mr. Shefke, allow us to have a meeting with the analysts, and we will discuss our report, the structure of the report, and we will be able to give some direction to our analysts. Yes, to answer your question, Monday there is a meeting. I asked this question because at 4 o'clock, the Minister of Finance, yes, you're quite right. At 4 o'clock, I don't know, should we sit or should we be sitting listening to the Minister of Finance? Well, we will free up our witnesses. Thank them very much for the time that they have spent with us, informing us.
Et on peut effectivement.
And do we have to do this in camera? Or we could just.
Prend 15 minutes pour faire la transition. Alors, on n'ira pas nécessairement.
No, it'll take 15 minutes to transfer over to in camera, so we won't do that necessarily. Thank you to our witnesses. Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Shifke, the statement, the economic statement is going to be at 4 o'clock, is it? Yes. So that will last about 45 minutes? I believe so. But we're not sure, of course. Well, I direct this to the committee members. Should we pause? Should we meet at 3:15 and then pause and then meet again after the economic statement is delivered? No?
Just a second. Obviously, it's an important, be a very important speech.
Okay,
we're all interested in the snapshot.
Okay, so basically we would just not have a meeting and do it. I think Wednesday the minister's coming, so we would have to meet on the report. We'd have to meet on the report. We'll get to you in a moment, Mr. Genroux. We'd have to meet on the report the following Monday, kind of thing, or we'd have to work it out somehow. Mr. Genroux.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I know from previous committees that it's typically a meeting that the first meeting is instructions for the analysts. Is that essentially the purpose of the meeting on Monday? Because
yes, it is.
That's often just like a 15-minute meeting. In some committees I've been on in the past. I'm not sure if we need the whole time.
So wanted to discuss about the witnesses for the CEPA study, the enforcement study. So I think we do need some time. Any other comments?
I mean, I brought it up. Obviously, I think it's a nonpartisan issue. To be able to be there to hear what the Minister of Finance has to report. There may be some aspects to it that touch us as a committee.
Yeah.
And so it might be interesting for us to be able to devote our time to what the Minister of Finance is going to be putting forward. If Mr. Genereux says that we can get it done in 15 minutes based on his experience.
I don't think personally. I don't think that's we're going to be able to get it done in a short time. What about if you left it with me and the clerk, and I can consult Madame Posé and Ms. Collins and Mr. Redekop after the clerk has given me some options? Because I don't think, I think there's a willingness to listen to the speech. Members want to be at the speech, and we can't do all the work that we want to do in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It's just, I don't think that's possible. I mean, sometimes it can be, Mr. Genereux, I agree, but we have to talk about witnesses. So would you leave it with me, and I'll discuss with the clerk and with the members of the steering committee?
Chair, I have a suggestion. We're in a situation where we really don't know what's going to happen on Monday. It's Wednesday. I know my colleague, Mr. Shifke, has brought up a very important issue. I don't know, should we move Monday's meeting to Wednesday? And that would perhaps make it very clear for everyone. But to begin a committee in 15 minutes, it could be done in 15 minutes because it's the first, but it could also be very much longer. So don't you think it would be easier for everyone just to make a decision right now to cancel Monday's meeting and begin again on Wednesday? Well, it depends. It's the minister that we are inviting on Wednesday. Well, we could move it to the following Monday, the instructions for the analysts. I think Mr. Genereux is right. Perhaps we could just meet for 45 minutes to discuss certain matters and then adjourn after that, and then we'll see what we've been able to accomplish in those 45 minutes. But because it...
Is that you? Was that you, Ms. O'Connell?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt. I just think it might be difficult even to meet in those 45 minutes because some members will be in person, some members will be virtual,
True.
And then coming back to connect.
Yeah, okay.
And I think in fairness, all parties will have opportunities to make statements and speak after, and I'm sure nobody has really figured out who's doing what on that day. And so in fairness, I think Mr. Godin's point about maybe just moving it to the following Monday would be the easiest so we don't run into issues of people making.
Okay, so here's then what I suggest is let me work with the clerk and with the steering committee, and we'll try and reschedule some things and just live with the fact that we're not having a meeting on Monday. Is that okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there a consensus around that? I see a thumbs up.
Yeah,
okay, two thumbs up.
Quick,
okay, so let's do that, and the clerk and I will work on it, and I will consult the members of the steering committee.
Mr. Chair, just quick from our side. Yeah, no, when I raised the point, I forgot that we were looking at witnesses for the CEBA study. So certainly agree with Mr. Shifke that course of action to go forward. So we'll wait for your final official determination.
Thank you for your cooperation, everyone. Great meeting, great study. And Mr. Saini says I have to use this for effect. Okay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thanks, everyone.